You raise a child for years. You hold their hand during their first steps, stay by their side when they're sick, and then one day, a single test result arrives, and it tells you that child isn't yours. So tell me, can your heart really accept that?
Daniel was a man who, from the outside, seemed to live a simple but decent life. He went to work in the morning, came home in the evening, and spent his weekends with his family. He had built his life not on big dreams, but on small, steady sources of happiness. For him, the most valuable thing was the family he had created. He had met his wife Emily at a young age. They had been together for many years before getting married. Their relationship hadn't been full of dramatic ups and downs. They argued sometimes, but they never broke apart. To Daniel, that was proof of real love. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough.
And they had a son. For Daniel, his son was the center of his life. He never forgot the first moment he held him in his arms. That was the day he realized he would no longer live just for himself. In many ways, he grew up alongside his child. He took him to school, helped him with homework, stayed up all night when he was sick. To him, that child wasn't just his son. He was his entire purpose. But some things slowly find their way into your mind, even when you don't notice them. It all started with a small moment. A coworker said something, almost like a joke. "Your son doesn't look like you at all." Daniel laughed it off at the time. People said things like that all the time. A child could resemble the mother or someone else. But that sentence stayed somewhere in the back of his mind.
Then, little by little, he started noticing details. His son's eye color was different. His facial features didn't resemble him at all. Things he had ignored for years suddenly became impossible to ignore. Sometimes, people can overlook what they don't want to see for years, but once doubt enters your mind, it begins to grow. Daniel tried to fight it. He got angry at himself. "This is ridiculous," he told himself. But his mind wouldn't leave him alone. Even at night, lying in bed, the thought kept coming back. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. Without telling anyone, he ordered a DNA test. Even doing that made him feel guilty, as if he were doing something wrong. But at the same time, he needed to know the truth, because not knowing had become heavier than knowing. When the results arrived, his life split into two. What was written on the screen was clear. There was zero probability of paternity. In that moment, everything went silent. It felt like time had stopped. The life he had lived for years suddenly felt unfamiliar. Everything he once believed to be real was now in question. And the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. The hardest part was realizing that the child he had believed to be his son for years was not biologically his. And yet, when he looked at that child, his feelings didn't change. He was still his son, because he was the one who raised him, the one who loved him. But the truth couldn't be denied. That night, he spoke to Emily. At first, Emily denied everything. She tried to avoid it, change the subject, but Daniel already knew. The result in his hands left no room for argument. Then, Emily went silent. And finally, she admitted the truth. But the most devastating part was this. Emily had known from the very beginning. This wasn't a mistake she discovered later. It was a secret she had carried for years. For Daniel, this wasn't just a lie. It was an entire life. carefully built on something that was never real. But the worst blow hadn't come yet. The child's father wasn't a stranger. It was Daniel's best friend. The man who had been in their home. The man they had shared meals with, laughed with, trusted. The man Daniel had called family was the child's real father. The betrayal wasn't just in his marriage. It was in his friendship, too. After that moment, everything collapsed. Now, there were only two choices, and both were painful. If he left, he would lose the child he had raised for years. If he stayed, he would have to live with this truth every single day. Some decisions aren't about right or wrong. They're about which pain you're willing to carry. And for Daniel, that was the reality.